From the nonpartisan Maddy Institute and the California channel at the state capitol, this is a Maddy Policy Brief. Welcome. Occupational licensing is intended to provide consumer protections, but at what cost? That was the question recently answered by a report issued by the state's nonpartisan Little Hoover Commission. Our guest is the executive director of that commission, Carol D'Alia. Welcome back to the Maddy Report.
Thank you for having me again.
So there's lots of occupations require a license. Why?
Well, we'll go back to the very first license, one of the very first licenses required in the state of California, all the way back to 1876. It was the Medical Practice Act, and it dealt with doctors. It was the very first time.
Sounds like you'd want to have those licensed.
Yeah, so there were fraudsters running around preying on either the
snake oil salesmen or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So for the first time, we required doctors to have a license to show that they had some level of competency or education. And what was important then, consumer protection, then morphed into licenses for a lot of other reasons. So extending to other goals such as professionalizing an occupation, creating standards, or perhaps a guarantee of quality. But at the same time, it also evolved into potentially a means of limiting the competition.
Right, right. It's interesting. People would say that occupational licensing is a bit of an arcane topic. Why did you think it was important to do a study on this?
Well, it started with a 2015 White House report, and what the White House report found was 60 years ago, 1 in 20 professions required a license.
5%.
Yeah. Today in California, 1 out of 5 are required to get government permission before they can practice in the profession. Now, this affects millions of Californians, so it may be arcane, but it touches on all of us. So when there's a license and it raises prices, we pay more. If you are somebody who wants to join that profession and we've created these additional barriers, it affects people who are trying to be upwardly mobile in their careers.
So let me ask you this. So we got a lot of occupations that are licensed. I'm wondering, are the kind of the challenges of licensing requirements, are they kind of specific to occupations, or there are some common issues that just licensing in general you got to deal with?
So we had this challenge of more than 250 licenses just under the Department of Consumer Affairs. That doesn't even include teachers, lawyers, insurance agents.
I hope you're going to say there are common challenges, because that's 250
yes.
individual
So we
problems.
couldn't look at that level of detail. We flew at a higher level, and we did find some common things. So one is reciprocity with other states. So for example, I'm an optometrist working in Chicago. I want to move my practice to Fresno. Well, maybe my license isn't going to be able to transfer here. And that was a common theme across many different licensing. Another challenge deals with folks who maybe have a prior conviction. We found that it was the same for many licenses. It was hard to figure out what would prevent you from getting a license and what wouldn't. The other same sort of thing, particularly in the professions where you earn lower income, was that you might invest a lot of time in training and the costs of the license, so they were expensive to have. So those were some of the common.
Creates a barrier, yeah. You also talk in your report about, quote, a jumble of licensing politics, unquote. What does that mean?
So 165 years of accumulated regulations creating this thicket of bureaucracy.
That is a great way to describe it, thicket of bureaucracy. It really paints a picture.
So you have these fairly autonomous boards who are under the umbrella of the Department of Consumer Affairs, but there is nobody in California to take this step back and have a holistic view of how we should license occupations. And at the heart of it, you mentioned politics. It's often a political activity. You don't see consumers banding together and going to the legislature and saying, we want you to regulate this profession. You see professionals or their associations coming to the legislature and saying, we want to be licensed. So it's more a political activity often than consumer protection.
Yeah, sometimes I teach law, and sometimes I have to explain to students how this works, the political process works. For example, maple syrup workers are exempt from overtime laws. And I ask the students, why do you think that is? Is it because of their job, or is it from some senator from Vermont who was very powerful at the time this law was passed and said, I need that exemption in the law? Politics plays a big role here. It's interesting in your report, you also mentioned a thing about nurses. Aren't there are multiple, whether you're a registered nurse or a licensed practical nurse, there's different organizations or bodies that then certify you or license you.
It's that's another very confusing jumble. So you have, if you're a certified nursing assistant, it's under the Department of Public Health. If it's a licensed vocational nurse or a registered nurse, it's two different boards underneath the Department of Consumer Affairs.
So it's interesting. It's like all over the place. You'd think
Right.
they'd all be under one roof, but apparently not. For a more in-depth analysis of this and other public policy issues important to Californians, please log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org and click on the Policy Analysis tab.